Okay, and welcome to my talk on domain storytelling. Good morning. My name is Henning and I'm from Germany, and maybe I will want to make some cheap German jokes. Are there any German speakers here in the room? Okay, at least 2 hands. Okay, pay for that. So domain storytelling will be the topic of the next session, and storytelling, where's the story best told? Of course, around a campfire. So please gather with me around the virtual campfire here and imagine a group of our ancestors, of cavemen, sitting in the midst of winter around their campfire. In their cave, outside the wind is howling, the snow is snowing, so everybody's happy. They sit inside where it's warm and comfy. But honestly, it's also a bit boring, so they're all happy when one of the hunters gets up and tells the other members of the tribe how it used to be in the summer when he and the other hunters went after the mighty bison, tracked it down, finally found it, and then killed it with their spears. And after he has finished with his little narrative, a break comes out, a silence. And into this silence, the cavemen hear a scratch from the wall, and they turn their heads and they see a picture of the story that they just heard was painted on the cave wall with animal blood and coal by one of the other cavemen. And yeah, that is what we want to do here and use it for software development as well. We want to spark a fire, tell a story, and paint a picture. And as our ancestors, we are still fascinated by monoliths, although we do not understand them. Of course, some things have changed. The fire isn't sparked in a cave anymore. It's typically sparked in a meeting room, and it's not really burning. It's in our heart and heads. And the story isn't told by hunters anymore. The story is told by our users, our domain experts. And the picture isn't painted on the cave wall anymore. We're not using animal blood and coal. We're using markers on a whiteboard. And here you can see my colleague Stefan doing a domain storytelling session. Stefan can't make it today, so you have to go along with me. Who am I? My name is Henning Schwentner. I'm known as the guy with the many kids. So I have 3 boys and 3 girls, and they have 3 different mothers. So I know how to operate in complex situations. And that's important for what I do at work. I work as a coder, coach, and consultant. So that means I work with teams on their big piece of old software. Typically big, typically old, legacy software, and typically software in a complex situation that has to be modernized. I've just published a book about that, Domain-Driven Transformation, currently only available in German. The English edition will be out in 1 or 2 months. And my other book is about domain storytelling, what we're going to talk about today. Just to get an understanding, who is working on an old big piece of monolithic software here? Okay. Who's not working? Who's working on the green field? Okay, great. I envy you guys here. Okay, so as I said, I work as a coder, coach, consultant at a company called WPS. We have different offices and different places in Germany. And working on this splitting monoliths thing leads you to, well, many different programming languages. So the .NET platform is very well suited to build monolithic software, but the Java guys, they can do this just as good. Of course, one language is best suited for that, that's COBOL. So I see many different programming languages, which is interesting for me as a technical person. But we will not talk too much about technology today. I want to tell you another story, and this time Not a story about cavemen, but a story about software, a story about a domain where software is used. And that story is about car leasing. What's car leasing? So if you want to get rid of your old combustion engine car and you want to buy a new shiny electrical car, but you don't have any money in your pocket, what are you going to do? Well, you can still go to your car dealer and tell them, well, do I get a car for this? And probably you will think, no way. No money, no car. But there is a solution for that. That it's what the car dealer will tell you. They will tell you there is this leasing thing. What's leasing? Well, normally you would have to give a big bag of money to the car manufacturer, and then the car manufacturer will give you a car. But now, if you don't have a big bag of money, then the car leasing company comes in between, and the leasing company will pay the price for the car. The car will be delivered to you by the car manufacturer, and then you, the end customer, have to make a monthly payment, the so-called installment, to the leasing company. And I think we can all well imagine that typically there's software in place, typically called monolease. And if we want to split that monolith, or if we want to build software for that on a green field, if we want to build software at all, we have to understand what the people working in the leasing business, because only if we can understand them, we can help them with our software. So it's important before we build software, before we build application software, that we understand what's called domain. Okay, and that's where domain storytelling jumps in. So here in this place, we would interview some people, invite people to a workshop, a customer, maybe a salesperson, and then let them tell their story. So and then we hear, well, the customer first tells their wish for a car to a salesperson. And then the salesperson calculates the installment for the contract. And let's assume the customer says, I can afford that installment. Then the customer will sign the contract. Then the salesperson will pass on the contract to a risk manager. The risk manager tells us, well, I first check the credit rating. Credit rating is the risk of the customer. Then I will calculate the resale value. That's the risk of the car. And based on this credit rating and resale value, the risk manager votes the contract. To vote means say, yes, we want to do this contract, or no, the risk is too high, we cannot do this contract. Let's assume the risk manager votes positively, then the salesperson will give the car to the customer. So this is a broad overview, a coarse-grained view on the car leasing process. This is your first domain story here. Okay, and what is it that we just did? Let's have a closer look at domain storytelling explained. First, we used a method that's coming from a family of methods. These methods are called collaborative modeling. Collaborative modeling because we want to build a model of the domain. And we don't want to do this on our own, not only tech people, only programmers, only developers. No, we want to do this collaboratively. That means together with our users, together with our domain experts. Because together we will build the common understanding. So that's the basic idea behind collaborative modeling, that we want to bring these two groups of people together. Us and them, developers and domain experts. And what we then want them to do is to crunch on the knowledge, on the domain knowledge here. That's a term from DDD, from domain-driven design. The idea is to chew on the knowledge until the juice comes out, the essence comes out. Only the essential knowledge is interesting for us. And there are a bunch of collaborative modeling methods. User story mapping, you might have heard about. Event storming, another thing that you might have heard about. And domain storytelling, we're going to talk about that today. User story mapping, event storming, those are methods that are done with sticky nodes. Domain storytelling, you've seen that it's a method with stick figures and arrows, and that actually sounds a bit silly. Things for kids, sticky notes, stick figures. But this is by design, this is deliberately, because we want to have methods that have a low entrance barrier. We want to have tools that are easily accessible. And domain storytelling is a combination of two important ingredients, the pictographic language on the one hand and the workshop format on the other. So the workshop format, what's that about? Well, we want to bring together the right people and let them tell a story. That's the basic idea. And who are the right people? Well, people that have the knowledge here. So we want to let them tell a story. We use storytelling because that's something that is deeply human. And of course, we want to know the right things. So we don't want to hear fairy tales there. That means the right people are people that really know what is happening in the domain. That means the people that are really doing the work. So having management present, that can help, but it's usually not enough. We need the people down from the trenches that are really doing the work. And of course, who are the right people? Chuck Norris is always the right people, but usually he can't make it because he has to save the world or do some stuff. And who are then the right people? Well, storytellers and listeners. Storytellers, those are the people that have the knowledge, that want to share their knowledge. Listeners, those are the people that want to hear the story, that want to gain this knowledge. Often storytellers are people from the domain side, users. Listeners are often developers, programmers, but it's not black-white. If you work for a long time in a domain as a programmer, you get a domain expert yourself. You know how to tell some stories. And of course, also the people from the different departments from the domain side, they will also learn from each other. The salesperson will learn from the risk manager and the other way around. So usually in a domain storytelling workshop and in collaborative modeling in general, everybody learns something. Okay, storytellers, listeners, and then typically we have a third role, that's the modeler, someone who draws the diagram and interviews the storytellers. Okay, and then we let them tell a story. And why are we using storytelling? Because we want to get rid of misunderstandings. And well, this is what's happening in many places in software development. This is us here, the programmer. That's our domain expert, that's our user, and they have all these great wishes and expectations. And well, this is what they get. And of course, we want to get rid of these misunderstandings. And that's the main goal of all these collaborative modeling techniques. Get rid of misunderstandings, build common understanding, and build shared knowledge. So it's also about expectations management here. So we follow a very simple rule here, and that is we hear the spoken sentence like the salesperson passes on the contract to the risk manager. And then we draw that spoken sentence into the diagram. So the salesperson hands over the contract to the risk manager. Spoken sentence, drawn sentence in a diagram. And thus we are reflecting what we have understood. So we show our users, this is what you just told me. And then they can tell us, yeah, that's right, or no, you didn't get me right. I don't hand over the contract. I pass on the contract. And for me, as a salesperson in car leasing, handing over and passing on, those are different activity, and that's important for me. Those are the small misunderstandings that add up to the big misunderstandings that make the projects fail in the end. So we get rid of small misunderstandings to get rid of big misunderstandings here. So it's a form of what we call active listening. Active listening as opposed to passive listening. Passive listening is what you are doing here, sitting there and nodding and saying yes, yes, yes. And if it goes bad, then I said black and you understood white. And so active listening is the idea of you repeat in your own words what I have just said, and then I get feedback and can say, yeah, you did get me right, or no, here's the difference. You can do that with paraphrasing, that is repeating the things in your own word, or with repeating the things in your own diagram. That's what we're doing here. Active listening. And we're using this storytelling idea because storytelling and listening to stories is something that is deeply rooted in human beings. Already the cavemen were doing that. All of us were sitting on the laps of our grandmothers hearing fairy tales like Hansel and Gretel. And so even children can listen to stories. And that's good because I said we want to have a low entrance barrier. We don't want to have to teach our users in a workshop for 1 week how the BPMN notation works, for example, or UML. So BPMN, UML, those are methods that are for communication between developer and developer. Here we need means to communicate between domain expert and developer. And we use notations that are simpler, maybe not as powerful, but easier to learn, simpler to understand. And that's where this pictographic language comes into play. And the pictographic language is simple. We need a canvas where we draw the picture on, and usually you see here we need a big white space, and then it's usually a good idea to give the domain story a name and leave some space for assumptions and comments here. And on that canvas, we draw the diagrams, and these diagrams are made of 2 kinds of icons and 1 kind of arrow, and that's basically it. The 2 kinds of icons are the actor, that is the stick figures, the people that are doing stuff. The other icons are the work objects, the things that our actors are working on. And then the 1 kind of arrow that we have is the activity. So what the actor does with a work object. And then we have the sequence numbers. They bring time into the story. So 2 kinds of icons, 1 kind of arrow, numbers for the time. And with this we can, for example, say, well, the risk manager is an actor and the contract is a work object and votes is an activity. And with that we can build different kinds of sentences. So there's kind of a grammar behind that. So we can say actor A works on work object W. Or actor A works on work object W using work object V. Or actor A hands over work object W to actor B. Or actor A and actor B collaborate on work object W. So from simple elements we can build more not so simple anymore structures. So now we can use different icons for different work objects, and that's usually a good idea. So here the installment has a different sign than the car. And the same is true for the actors. So often we have people, 1 person acting, but sometimes we have a group of people as 1 actor. Or we have IT systems that also act in our stories, that also do something. And of course, actor here is meant as someone who is doing something, not someone who is working with the movies or on TV. Okay, when we look onto the pictographic language and we see it's made of simple elements, we also see what's not contained in the language. So we have actors, work objects, activities, but what we do not have are conditionals. So there's no if-else, there's no switch case, there's no or. So was that forgotten? No. This is deliberately, again, we don't have that in the notation because we want to have pictures that tell one story, one scenario, and if we want to model another scenario, then we are going to model different diagrams. We're going to draw different diagrams. So that means usually domain stories do not come alone, they come in groups. This is also how stories go. Stories do not go, when you think about this Hansel and Gretel fairy tale, if the sun is shining, then Hansel and Gretel go out into the forest and the witch catches them. Or else, if it's raining, they stay at home and the big bad wolf comes and eats them up. No, those are different stories, right? Different scenarios. And we model them as different pictures, as different diagrams here as well. This is also called scenario-based modeling. Domain stories are not the only scenario-based modeling thing. That's a general principle here. When we say we model one case in one picture, in one diagram. And when we look onto our car leasing example again, then we see what we modeled so far is car leasing the happy path. And that's usually a good start. The happy path, the 80% case, the good case, that's usually what we want to start with. And then we see, okay, what are important, not so happy paths? And Mark, I said important. We don't want to model all the paths. That would be too much. We want to model the important stuff. So here in our example, we want to model what's happening if we calculate an installment and then the customer sees, well, I cannot afford that installment. What happens then? Maybe we recalculate with a longer term and then we get a lower installment. Or when we look onto the risk management, when the risk manager makes their vote, yes or no, what happens if they happen no, if the contract is too risky? Then we cannot give the car to the customer immediately. But maybe we talk to the customer again and say, if you bring a custodian, then we can do the contract. That again is another story that we would put into another picture. And you see, if we would put all this stuff, the happy path, and we're doing the recalculation, and we're bringing custodian, if we would bring this into one picture, then it just would become huge. And we want to have pictures that fit on one page that can be understood as a whole. Domain stories with about 10, 15, maybe 20 steps, but not more. So that's one of the reasons why we usually have more than one domain story. Another reason is what we call scope. What's scope? That's made of three factors: the granularity, the point in time, and the domain purity. Granularity is the level of flight that we are working on. Are we working coarse-grained, looking at the whole process, but not on the details? That's called coarse-grained. Or are we looking on the small stuff, on the details, but don't look at the whole picture, at the big picture? That's called fine-grained. And then, of course, there are different steps in between there as well. Sorry. So maybe I show you this. So this idea of coarse-grained, fine-grained. In practice, usually we need more levels, just coarse and fine-grained, and then this metaphor of Alistair Cockburn is a good idea, where he says, well, imagine a day at the beach and look at the different beings that are there. So there's the middle, the sea level, and if you go up from the sea level, there's the kite level, where you have a kite flying. The kite sees more of the whole picture, but less details. And then there's the cloud level, where you see the whole world, but no details. And when you go down from the sea level, there's the fish level, where you see more details. And then at the bottom of At the sea, there's the clam level, where the clam sees every grain of sand. And, well, that's usually too detailed. So this metaphor was built for use cases, but also makes sense for domain stories or for collaborative modeling in general. That's the first scope factor, the granularity. And the second scope factor is the point in time. So which process are we modeling? Which story are we telling? This process as it is today, or the process as we want it to be in the future? So there can be different points in time. Now is the as-is modeling. When we see the process of today, then we often see, well, this process is not ideal. So a next step is to optimize that process, which is a to-be process. And then when the new system is there, again, we change the process. Or when the legal regulations change, then we can have a different process here as well. Second scope factor, the point in time. And then we have the third scope factor, that is the domain purity. Domain purity means, are we modeling the pure domain process, what's happening in the real world with paper and stuff, or are we modeling the digitalized version, the version where the IT system or the IT systems appear as actors here? So 3 factors: granularity, point in time, domain purity, and we can combine them, and depending on what we want to do, different combinations make sense. If you want to learn about a domain, to build software for that, then it's usually a good start to begin coarse-grained, to get the overview, to model the as-is process as it's now, and to be pure, to really see what's behind the solution that's already there, to find the problem again. Okay. And with that, I would like to do a little exercise with you. Thank you, Owen. And the exercise will be that we all together will model a process, or we will tell a story together. I am going to be the moderator and modeler, and you are going to be my domain experts. And that's why we need a domain where we are all experts in. And that's why we are going to model how to travel by train. I assume you've all traveled by train. Probably many of us came in this morning here by train. And so let's see how to travel from a city A to a city B with the train. And we will do that on a coarse-grained level, since we only have an hour for this session here. Okay, I'm going to use a digital tool for that. And you see here, we have the big modeling space, and we have the name up here. And we say, travel by train, coarse-grained. And also we want to look at the as-is variant. Okay, traveling by train. How is that working?
You need to get to the train station.
You need to get to the train station. Okay. Then I model gets to train station. And now you said you need to get to the train station. Who is you? What's the role?
Actor.
What's the actor here?
The person who wants to travel.
Yeah. Who's the person that wants to travel?
Passenger.
Traveler, passenger. Okay. Traveler, passenger. No, we're not sure which is the right term here yet, so maybe we start with both. Okay, so the traveler gets to the train station and then? Buys a ticket. Okay. Great. And who do they buy it from?
Railway company?
The railway company.
The ticket office.
The ticket office? Okay. And maybe I write it like this, ticket office, part of the railway company. That's what I assume from what you're telling me. And you see, I use the smaller unit here. Oh, we can discuss if that's a good idea here. And now we have ticket office. That sounds like a place. Do we know the name of the people that are working there at the ticket office?
No.
Sorry? No, we don't. And I go to the meta level. This is a typical situation that will happen in real life too. Here we see we're obviously missing domain knowledge here. We all know how to be a traveler, but yeah, we don't know how to be a ticket office. A ticket office question mark. So what is the ticket per office person? Okay, so the traveler buys the ticket from the ticket office person and then
Gets the ticket from the person.
gets the ticket from the person. Yeah. On this coarse-grained level, I would say maybe that is part of this step here, buying the ticket. So what we probably will do later is, okay, build another story here. Buying tickets, fine-grained. And there we would model the smaller steps of this handing out to the traveler here. So let's assume buying ticket contains this, the ticket office person gives the ticket to the traveler, so now the traveler has a ticket.
Go to the right platform.
Go to the right platform, okay.
Choose a platform.
Okay, go to or choose, what's the...
Go to, because you don't choose it.
Don't
Right,
choose
choose
it.
where it goes.
Well, but you need to know which platform is the right.
Okay, so how do we know what the right platform is?
You search for
Oh.
it on the departure table, right?
Okay, you search for it on the departure table. So there's a step before that, right? Search for late right platform, sorry. On departure table, right? That was the word. Okay. And
Question, is it the departure table, is it still coarse or fine grain? Because it
Huh.
may be on the ticket, right? So it's kind of a...
good point, good question. Is this searching for the right platform? Is that the right granularity here, coarse-grained? Do we want to leave that in? Or do we say, well, it goes to right platform and that contains this? What would you say? Do we want to keep it?
I would say course grade, just get on the train.
Just get on the train. Okay. Then maybe I put a note here, maybe to fine-grained for the time being. Oh, sorry. So we don't lose it now. And maybe when we're done with the process, we delete it. Okay, so gets on the train, I understand is the next thing that happens, right?
You've got the orders wrong for right platform. They need to be swapped. The 3 and 4 need to be swapped around.
Sorry, could we get the? Yeah, could we give you the mic? Then,
Numbers 3 and 4 need to be swapped around.
okay, thank you. Okay, so this is gets on, and this has to be 3, right? Okay, so now the traveler searches for the right platform on the departure table, goes to the right platform, and then gets on the train. And then?
Gets off the train at the right time.
The train leaves the station, and what was that?
Gets off the train at the right time.
Okay.
Right station.
Okay, so maybe I put that here. Gets off train again. And you said at right station. And then you said here between the traveler gets on the train and gets off the train, something happens there, the train leaves the station. And who makes the train leave the station?
The train driver, but that might be too far ingrained.
The train driver, okay. And you're saying that might be too fine-grained. I will put them in here and see. Train driver. No, you said leaves station. No, drives train to leave station, right? Or maybe we leave out the station here and say the train driver drives the train with the traveler. And this should be step number 6, right? Okay, so now the passenger gets on the train, then the train driver drives the train with the passenger. The passenger gets off the train at the right station. And then what? Are we done then?
Exit from the station.
Sorry?
The traveler exits from the station.
Okay, the traveler exits from the station. Okay, when they get to the station, then they should also exit. Okay.
Sorry, what if they need to get just to the station?
Sorry?
Not necessarily.
Not necessary.
What if they are meeting with somebody in a cafe on a train station?
Aha. Okay, interesting. Not necessarily we have to leave here. So what we see here is there are different possibilities here. So as I said, we usually start with the happy path or the standard case. What is the standard case? That we are meeting someone at a cafe or that we are exiting the station? Exiting. Okay, then I write down a note here, alternative, meet someone at a cafe. Okay, so now we have train station and ride station. Is it okay that they have slightly different names, or should we have a common name here?
Should be 2. Maybe.
It should be 2.
Departure station and arrival station.
Ah, okay, departure station and arrival station. Okay, so this is the departure station, right? And this here, that is the arrival station. And this is also the arrival station, right? And earlier you said the traveler passenger gets off the train at the right station, at the arrival station. So obviously there's also an alternative here, go off at the wrong station, right?
Happens to the best of us.
It does. Leaving at the wrong station. Okay. From a coarse-grained perspective, is that it? Traveling by train, or are we missing important steps here?
There's other use cases, like if you've got a multi-stop, you need to change trains to get to
Uh-huh.
the station, for example.
Okay.
I think there's a bit of the story in the argument.
Okay. So I repeat that for everybody. You're saying there are other use cases like multi-stop connections here. This is just a one-stop connection. And I would say here for the simple case that we're starting with, it's okay. But certainly we want to know that there are that there is this multi-stop connection. So, oh, sorry. And maybe we say here in the description, we make an assumption. This is our direct connection, right?
Not got checking of the ticket.
Aha. That's interesting. So far, we have this ticket here, and we bought it, and then we never use it again. Right, okay, so there's some checking of the ticket going on. Where in the story does this happen?
Happens maybe, doesn't always happen.
Okay, it happens maybe, it doesn't always happen.
If some have machines at the exit to check it,
Mm-hmm.
some have it
On
on
the train.
the train, so there's two different scenarios there.
Okay, so there's differences here. There can be a machine that does the check, or it can be on the train. What is the more common case?
Departure
On the
station
train?
gate.
Okay, so we have two different opinions. And what makes it even worse, it's different in different countries. So in Germany, for example, we don't have the machines, nowhere. So in this case, well, we have to make a decision for one of them. So let's go with the machine. So we use a machine actor here as well. So the machine, what's the name of that machine? Checks the ticket of the traveler. Sorry, checks ticket of traveler. And that happens before the traveler gets on the train, right? So this should be step number 5, right?
It can be both, it can be before and after when you leave as well.
Okay. So here before exiting the arrival station, there is again a check of the ticket. Is that what you're saying? So there's a number 9 here as well.
Isn't it a different machine though, because you're at a different station?
Ah. Is it?
Yeah. It's a physical machine, so it's in two different locations.
Okay, then. So then it's here somewhere there. Okay, and now the story becomes too complex. We can have no further steps. No, maybe I have to zoom out a bit. Is that still okay on the projector? So, did I get that right? Here I will go and step through the whole story again. So it starts with our traveler who gets to the departure station. Then they buy the ticket from the ticket office, or the ticket office person, we don't know the name. Traveler searches for the right platform on the departure table, goes to the right platform. The machine checks the ticket of the traveler. The traveler gets on the train. The train driver drives the train. The traveler gets off the train at the arrival station. The machine checks, another machine, a different machine checks again the ticket of the traveler, and the traveler exits at the arrival station. Or alternatively, meets someone at a cafe. Is that it on a coarse-grained level?
You might buy the ticket before you go to the station.
Aha, that might also be possible. So there are different options here between steps 1 and 2. They could be changed, right?
You could use an Oyster card, just type in,
You could use an Oyster card to tap in.
or just contact us.
Okay.
You can also get the wrong train, right?
You can also get on the wrong train. Yeah. Okay. So we see there are many other stories hiding behind this. We don't have the time to model them here, but of course you're right. This is what would happen in real life. That we say, okay, now let's model these other stories as well, and then we have several pictures here. Okay. Also, one thing you said, I will add that here because you said it and I didn't put it here, is alternative. It's not the machine, but a check on the train. That is done by a person, right? And what's the name of that person?
Controller.
Controller. Okay. So, thank you for that exercise, for being my domain experts here, and some things that you might have seen here as well. We already talked about that we are being experts in being a traveler, but not an expert in being a ticket office person or a train driver. So we don't even know what the name of this guy is here. Controller also, maybe that's the name. Maybe that's a conductor, or we would have to talk to somebody from London Transport or whatever. We would have to have real domain expertise. And that's, of course, what we do in real life. So what is crucial to have successful sessions here, it's nice to paint pictures, but the most important part, of course, is to have the right people with the real knowledge here. And when I look at this story, I see a typical kind of bad smell. And that is, there's one actor sitting in the middle, like the spider in the net. And the other actors, the train driver, the machine, the ticket office person, there's one arrow pointing on them, and that's it. And that's a typical sign that these people were not attending the workshop where we draw the diagram. Because if we have a ticket office person here, then they will tell us, I'm not a ticket office person, but I'm a blah, blah. And I also do stuff when I sell the ticket here, because I have to look up the connection and I book the money and blah, blah, blah. That would be part of the process here, of course. And with that, I would like to go back to the slides. Oh, sorry, no, not at the right. At the right point, sorry. That's the problem when you have so many slides. And use the last 10 minutes to tell you some additional stuff here. So first of all, there's different tools that we can use. We've seen PowerPoint as a possibility. Well, not so nice for the workshop situation, only for giving talks and maybe doing documentation. Then there's this tool, egan.io. This is what I was just using here in the exercise. That's open source and browser-based. So it's JavaScript stuff only running in the browser. So press save on a regular basis here. One online tool, but you don't need a digital tool to do a session like this. Paper is enough, or a whiteboard and sticky notes is enough. Here you can see a customer checks the schedule in the system and blah, blah, blah. If you don't have a whiteboard, then you can use paper, but, well, whiteboards are better because refactoring is easier. On paper, you have to cross out a lot of stuff, and you've seen in the session I moved stuff around a lot. That's quite normal. Digital blackboards or whiteboards can also be used. I also like to use Miro, an online whiteboard, where you can combine it with a tablet with a pencil. And then there is different modes. But that is not so important now. What's more important is that we can use domain storytelling for different purposes. So it's nice to tell stories, but what are we doing with that now? Of course, they're no end in themselves. We want to use them to develop software, and where can they help us? So they can help us understand the domain and learn the language of the domain, but they can also help us to work on the requirements, so we can derive user stories from domain stories. And beware, they're both stories, but different animals. It's a bit like Java and JavaScript, domain stories, user stories. We can use them to draw boundaries, and we can use them to implement a domain model. And of course, other purposes as well. And since we have some time left, I will quickly step into these different purposes. Learning the domain language, I think that's quite obvious. All the words that we have in our domain stories that we did, they are coming from the domain. There are no technical words inside, and that's good. That is because we were modeling pure here, only focusing on the problem, focusing on the domain. When building software, usually a good idea to start with that. So for example, we can words like the installment, which for me was strange. I never heard that word before I got into this domain. And then it's a good idea if you hear such word that you don't know in such a session to, let them explain to you. And then maybe start a glossary and say, well, here an installment is the monthly payment made by the customer. Then we can use it to draw boundaries, and that will help us for our architecture. That will help us to build modular systems. You remember I told you my work is mainly splitting monoliths, and with this we find boundaries in the domain that can help us put boundaries into the monolithic software, make the software modular. And drawing boundaries means that it's typically ideal to start coarse-grained with the optimized process and with a pure process, and then ask the question, which activities belong together from the perspective of the actors. So when we go back to this here, which activities belong together here? Well, we learned from our domain experts the steps 1, 2, 3, and 8. They belong together and form a subdomain inside our whole domain, which is called sales. And then we learn there's another subdomain down here, the steps 5, 6, and 7, they form the risk assessment. And when we build software for leasing, when we build modern software for leasing, we will not build the one big leasing software anymore, monolease, but we will build one module sales and another module risk assessment. Those could be modules inside a deployment monolith, and it's a so-called modular monolith or monolith, or they could be programs in their own right. Then we are going towards a microservices architecture or a self-contained system. Okay. And then one final purpose Sorry, I have to find that. Here. And then one final purpose in that is how do we now, when we found the boundaries and everything, how do we use the domain knowledge that we built so far to build a domain model? That means how do we end up with classes and methods? Or if you were attending the talk earlier, how do we end up with types and functions when you're modeling in a functional way? Well, first of all, it's a good idea to move on from coarse-grained modeling to fine-grained modeling. And here I already did that. So you see, this is only the sales part. So the salesperson fills out the contract, the car model and the price. Then the salesperson calculates the installment for the contract from a price and an interest. And then the salesperson offers the contract to a customer. The customer signs the contract. So you see we have many more details than on the coarse-grained level. We have the car model, the price, the installment price, interest, more domain concepts here. And there are two rules of thumb to follow here. The first rule of thumb is we take the work objects and make classes out of them in the software. And then we take the activities and make methods out of those in the software. So here we see one central concept is the contract. So we make a class contract here. And this is an entity in the DDD sense, well, if you're into DDD. And then we take fill out here and make a method fill out car model and price here, these things, and then calculate and offer and sign. They all become methods here in our contract. And here we can see why, domain-driven design is called domain-driven design. Now we're building a design and architecture that is driven by the knowledge of the domain. The domain is the sphere of knowledge that we're building software for. And what we then get is called a behavioral rich domain model. A domain model with rich behavior, because it doesn't only model the things, the work objects, it also models the behavior, what the things do, or to look more closely on this, to what the users are doing with the things. That's the behavior what we want to put on here. And what's interesting, contract, fill out, car model, calculate, installment, sign, those are all words coming from the domain language. So we're not using technical language here, we're using domain language here. This principle is called ubiquitous language, if you want to have a fancy word for that. So this idea of using the domain language everywhere ubiquitously, even in the code. Okay, and well, the car model, the price, they become types in their own right. That's a possibility that we have here. And of course, if we want to put that into C#, then we end up with something like this. And what's interesting, typically we will have many types here, not only the contract, but also we will build domain types like car model and amount and interest and sign date, which are types on their own rights. If you're into DDD, this is an entity, and car model, that's what's called a value object. We can use records for value objects or read-only record structs if we are on C#10 or later. And that's, of course, true here for the amount and the currency. Or the currency here can even be an enum. Okay, but so much about the code. What's important behind all this are the basic ideas of object orientation. That's why it's called actually object orientation, because we take the objects from the real world and we make objects in the software out of that. Right? The ticket in the real world becomes a class ticket in the computer, and then we can instantiate that class and we have a ticket object here as well. Okay. If you want to look at a concrete example where I show some domain modeling with domain storytelling and then drawing boundaries and finally implementing it in code, then please have a look at leasingninja.io. That's the teaching example that I use in my workshops when I teach DDD, domain storytelling, software architecture in general. Okay. And with that, I come to the conclusion. So what now? If you thought this interesting, what we were talking about, then further reasoning would be the domain storytelling website, domainstorytelling.org, or of course, buy my book. For example, from my website, or buy my other book when it's out in English. The Leasing Ninja, I talked about that already. If you're interested in this collaborative modeling stuff, then I would recommend you to come to the Como Camp. That's a collaborative modeling unconference in Vienna in May. And with that, the end is near. Unfortunately, I didn't bring any swag because the stickers are empty. Sorry about that. But what's important is when you go out, you will find something like this here. Please evaluate the session, and then you have these different stacks here. And for the organizers, it's important to know how you find the session. And of course, please take the green, the green step. No, of course, take the one that expresses your feeling about this. Yeah, and with that, thank you. I will be here the whole day. If there are questions, just come to talk to me. And happy end. That's it. Thank you. And